You know, there's something rather amusing about the whole business of healing. We spend years, sometimes decades, trying to fix ourselves. We read books, attend workshops, practice techniques, seek guidance from teachers and therapists. We're absolutely convinced that somewhere inside us, something is broken, and if we could just find the right method, the right insight, the right practice, we could finally put ourselves back together again. But what if I told you that the very person you're trying to heal doesn't actually exist? Now, I don't mean this in some cold, dismissive way. I mean it quite literally. The you that feels broken, the you that's carrying all this suffering, the you that's desperately seeking wholeness, this entity is a phantom. A very convincing phantom, mind you, but a phantom nonetheless. And here's the beautiful irony. The moment you see through this illusion, the very moment you recognize that there's no separate self to be healed, the suffering that seemed so real begins to dissolve, like morning mist in the sunlight. This is what I want to explore with you today. Not as something to achieve, you understand, but as something to recognize. Because the final phase of healing isn't really about becoming whole at all. It's about seeing that you were never actually fragmented in the first place. Think about a wave in the ocean for a moment. Imagine that wave suddenly became conscious of itself as a wave. It looks around and sees other waves, some bigger, some smaller, some crashing magnificently on the shore, others subsiding quietly back into the depths. And our wave begins to feel inadequate. I'm not high enough, it thinks. I'm not lasting long enough. I need to improve myself. I need to become a better wave. Absurd, isn't it? Because the wave has forgotten something fundamental. It's not separate from the ocean. It is the ocean temporarily taking the form of a wave. When it crashes on the shore and dissolves, the ocean doesn't die. The ocean simply stops doing that particular wave for a while. We are exactly like that wave. We've become so mesmerized by our individual form, so hypnotized by the sense of being a separate self, that we've completely forgotten we're the ocean. We've forgotten that we're the whole of existence, temporarily experiencing itself through this particular pattern, this particular nervous system, this particular point of view, and this forgetting. This is what we call the skin-encapsulated ego. It's the illusion that you are a little person trapped inside your skull, peering out through your eyes at a world that's fundamentally alien to you. You're in here, and everything else is out there. Subject and object, self and other, the experiencer and the experienced. But this division is imaginary. It's a trick of perception, a necessary fiction that allows you to function in the world, but a fiction nonetheless. And the suffering you feel, the sense that something is terribly wrong, springs directly from this imaginary separation. Because when you believe you're separate, you live in constant insecurity. You're a fragment in a universe of fragments, vulnerable, isolated, always under threat. You must defend yourself, protect yourself, make yourself secure in a world that seems indifferent or even hostile to your existence. And so the great search begins. The search for healing, for wholeness, for enlightenment, for peace. But you see, the searcher is the very illusion you're trying to escape from. The one who feels broken is the dream character, and you're trying to heal a character in a dream. Now, let me show you something about consciousness that might change how you see yourself entirely. Imagine consciousness as a floodlight, vast, boundless, illuminating everything equally without preference or discrimination. In its natural state, awareness simply shines. And in that shining, the entire universe appears. There's no sense of inside or outside, no feeling of being a separate observer. There's just this vast open knowing, but then something remarkable happens. This floodlight begins to narrow. It contracts into a spotlight, focusing on just one small area of the whole. And that area happens to be this body, these thoughts, these sensations, these memories. Now, why does this happen? Well, it's tremendously practical. A body moving through the world needs to pay attention to where it's going. It needs to distinguish food from poison, friend from predator, safety from danger. This narrowing of consciousness into a localized sense of self is incredibly useful for survival. But we've become so completely identified with the spotlight that we've forgotten the floodlight even exists. We think we are the narrow beam of attention rather than the vast light itself. It's as if you were watching a movie through a small hole in a piece of cardboard. All you can see is a tiny portion of the screen, and you begin to think that tiny portion is the whole movie. You've forgotten that there's an entire screen, a whole cinema, in fact, that you're part of. The final phase of healing begins when this spotlight starts to open up again. When you begin to notice that your awareness is much vaster than you thought. When you realize that you're not just the contents of consciousness, the thoughts, feelings, sensations, but consciousness itself. Let me ask you directly. Are you aware right now? Of course you are. You're aware of these words, aware of your surroundings, aware of sensations in your body, perhaps aware of thoughts commenting on what you're reading. But here's the question that changes everything. What is doing the being aware? If you look for it, you won't find anything. You'll find thoughts, but you're aware of thoughts, so you can't be the thoughts. You'll find sensations, but you're aware of sensations, so you can't be the sensations. You'll find emotions, but you're aware of emotions, so you can't be the emotions. What you are is the awareness itself, the space in which all experience appears, the light that illuminates everything but can't be seen because it's doing the seeing. And this awareness has no boundaries. It's not located anywhere in particular. It doesn't start at your skin and stop at your fingertips. It's more accurate to say that your body appears in awareness rather than awareness being inside your body. When you recognize this, when you shift from identifying as the spotlight to recognizing yourself as the floodlight, everything changes. You're no longer a fragment trying to become whole. You're the wholeness itself, temporarily focused on this particular experience. You are not in the universe, looking at it from the outside. The universe is in you, or better yet, you are the universe, aware of itself through these eyes, through this nervous system, through this particular point of view. Now here's where things get really interesting, and perhaps a bit maddening if you're still trying to control everything. Most of us spend our entire lives attempting to make ourselves secure. We build careers to ensure financial security. We build relationships to ensure emotional security. We build beliefs and philosophies to ensure psychological security. We're constantly trying to arrange our lives in such a way that we'll finally be safe, finally be okay. And what happens? The more we try to make ourselves secure, the more anxious we become. The tighter we grip life, the more it seems to slip through our fingers. The harder we work to control our circumstances, the more out of control we feel. This is what I call the law of reversed effort, or the backwards law. It's the principle that the more you try to force something, the more it eludes you. Have you ever tried desperately to fall asleep when you absolutely needed to? Perhaps you had an important meeting the next morning and you knew you needed rest. So you lay in bed, trying with all your might to sleep. And what happened? The very effort to sleep kept you wide awake, staring at the ceiling, watching the hours tick by. Or perhaps you've tried to remember a name or a word that was right on the tip of your tongue. The harder you concentrated, the more impossible it became to recall. But then, the moment you stopped trying, when you'd moved on to something else entirely, suddenly there it was, popping into your mind effortlessly. This principle runs through every aspect of life. You cannot force happiness. The very effort creates tension. which is the opposite of happiness. You cannot force love. Grasping and possessiveness drive love away. You cannot force enlightenment. The very seeking creates the seeker, which is the illusion you're trying to see through. Now, why is this? Why does trying harder make things worse? It's because life itself is fundamentally insecure. That is its nature. Life is change, constant transformation, perpetual movement. Everything that exists is in a state of flux. Your body is changing, your thoughts are changing, your circumstances are changing. Nothing remains the same from one moment to the next. And we hate this, we fight against it with everything we have. We want permanence in an impermanent world. We want security in a universe built on uncertainty. We want to freeze life into a comfortable, manageable form. But this is like trying to capture a river in your hands. The very act of grasping causes the water to flow away faster. The tighter you squeeze, the less you hold. There's tremendous wisdom in insecurity, you see. Water has no security whatsoever. It has no fixed form, no permanent shape, no guaranteed location. Put it in a cup, it becomes the cup. Pour it on the ground, it spreads in every direction. Heat it, it becomes steam. Freeze it, it becomes ice. It adapts instantly to whatever conditions it encounters. And this complete insecurity is precisely what makes water so powerful. It flows around obstacles, finds a way through the smallest crack, wears away the hardest stone. It cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Now compare water to ice. Ice seems much more secure, doesn't it? It has a definite shape, a solid form. It appears stable, permanent, safe. But this very rigidity makes it fragile. Drop it and it shatters. Apply pressure and it cracks. And eventually, inevitably, when the temperature changes, it melts back into water. We try to live like ice in a world that flows like water. We attempt to freeze ourselves into a fixed identity, a permanent self, a secure position. And then we're shocked when this creates suffering, when we feel brittle and breakable, when life's constant changes threaten to shatter us. The healing comes not from achieving security, but from surrendering to insecurity, from accepting that change is not something happening to life, but is life itself. Impermanence is not a flaw in the system, it's the very energy that makes existence possible. Imagine you're swimming in the ocean and suddenly you panic. You begin thrashing about, desperately trying to keep your head above water. Your arms flail, your legs kick frantically, you gulp air and water. The more you struggle, the more exhausted you become, and the faster you begin to sink. But then, in a moment of complete desperation, you give up. You stop fighting. You let go entirely. And in that surrender, you discover something miraculous. The water holds you. Your body naturally floats. All you had to do was relax, trust, allow. This is the great secret hidden in plain sight. The struggle itself creates the problem. The effort to escape suffering is what perpetuates it. When you stop fighting life, when you stop resisting what is, when you completely surrender to the flow of existence, you discover that you're already being held, already being carried, already perfectly safe in the only way that matters. Not safe from change, nothing can protect you from that, but safe as change, safe as the flow. Safe because you're no longer separate from it. You're not in the river, trying not to drown. You are the river, flowing effortlessly from source to sea. Let me ask you something that might seem obvious, but I want you to really consider it. Where is your past right now? Not your memory of the past. I'm asking about the actual past itself. The events that happened yesterday, last week, 10 years ago. Where are they? Can you touch them? Can you go back to them? Can you find them anywhere in your present experience? And your future Where is that? The things you're planning for tomorrow, next month, next year? Can you point to them? Can you enter them even for a moment? Can you experience them right now? The obvious answer is no. The past exists only as a memory arising in the present moment. The future exists only as a thought or anticipation arising in the present moment. The actual past and the actual future have no existence whatsoever outside of the thoughts you're having about them right now. And yet, we don't live in the present moment, do we? We live in psychological time. We carry the entire weight of our history on our backs. Every regret, every failure, every wound, every grievance. And we project our anxieties into an imagined future, worrying about what might happen, planning for contingencies, trying to ensure outcomes. We're like someone trying to read a book while constantly thinking about the previous chapter and worrying about the next one. They're so busy remembering and anticipating that they're not actually reading the page in front of them. They're missing the only thing that's actually happening. This creates a peculiar kind of suffering. We feel guilty about the past, or nostalgic for how things used to be. We feel anxious about the future, or excited about how things will be. And meanwhile, the present moment, the only moment that actually exists, slips by unnoticed. We're always getting ready to live. We're always preparing for life, waiting for the right conditions, postponing our happiness until we've achieved something, fixed something, become something other than what we are right now. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll feel at peace when I resolve this relationship issue. I'll be fulfilled when I finally figure myself out. And so we sacrifice the present for an imagined future that never actually arrives. Because when you get the promotion, there's another goal waiting. When you resolve that relationship, there's another problem emerging. When you figure one thing out, 3 more mysteries appear. The future you're waiting for is always on the horizon. And a horizon, by definition, is something you can never reach. The closer you walk toward it, the further it recedes. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't plan or prepare. Of course, you need to think about the future in practical terms. But there's a difference between practical planning and psychological time. Practical planning happens in the present. You make decisions now based on likely outcomes. Psychological time is when you believe that the future will somehow be more real, more important, more alive than this moment. The final phase of healing is the return to the eternal present, not as a technique you practice, but as a recognition of what's always been true. This moment, right now, as you're reading these words, is all there is. It's all there ever has been. It's all there ever will be. The past was once a present moment. The future, if it comes, will be a present moment. Every experience you've ever had, every experience you ever will have, happens in the now. And when you truly land in this moment, when you stop running from it or trying to change it, something remarkable happens. The burden you've been carrying simply isn't there anymore. Not because your problems have been solved, but because you see that the problems existed only in time, and time itself is a mental construct. What's wrong with this moment unless you think about it? Look directly at your actual experience right now. Not your thoughts about your experience, but the raw, immediate